Greetings, everyone. It's Phil Amerson with the To Be and Do podcast, where we talk about the importance of community and interdependence and belonging to one another in this time, in this world. And I've been giving a lot of attention to Methodists on this podcast, and we thought we ought to broaden just a little bit, actually, to an antecedent denominational group. I mean, John was another. There are a couple of other Johns. There's John Knox and John Calvin, and so we have the Reverend Tyler Brinks, who's one of the pastors associate at First Presbyterian Church here in Bloomington. Tyler graduated from Hope College and from that school in Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton's Theological Seminary. And I've come to value Tyler as a good friend. And welcome, Tyler. It's good to have you on this podcast.
Thank you for having me, Phil. Delight to be here.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I would like to hear you chat with us about or share is what the world looks like to you as a younger person entering ministry. I've actually read an article last week that said some denominations are in trouble because there are too few people entering the ministry. And I know there are a lot of denominational efforts to address that. But I think our listeners, our viewers would like to hear from you. Why did a talented young man choose the vocation of ministry, or did it choose you?
Great question. I, in part, think it chose me. I've been afforded kind of a lot of just rich connections within my own denomination and a few others. I've made Methodist friends, as this is testimony to. I think as I wasn't necessarily aware to the extent that it had been reported, even as I was growing up, that the church is so evidently on the decline. And while that demographically, I guess, sort of tracks, especially within mainline traditions, as you said moments ago, I went to Hope College, and so there is a degree of hope that I feel is
There you are.
more strongly embedded within my spirit than all the narratives of decline, whether that's in political capital or numbers of people in worship on a Sunday morning or in Sunday school or in the youth group. There's other metrics that I think are valuable to consider, and just other stories that are compelling that give sort of a counter narrative. I've followed some of Ryan Burge's work. He's written. Yeah. He's sort of one of the chief demographers, I guess, in sociologists, sort of tracking sort of these things. And just this past Sunday, I had seen him in Indianapolis a couple weeks ago, and one of his more recent sort of, his newsletters is like, "When will half of your church be dead?" And which is just, I mean, you think about, what are the sort of attention-grabbing headlines, and that certainly captured one for me. And I brought it to our church in Sunday's sermon. Didn't necessarily plan to at the start of the week, but it sort of emerged. And I did have to say, I was like, this is denominational, not congregational. So don't worry about us precisely. But I did sort of say, it's 2049 is when demographically half of the PCUSA will no longer be with us, namely because of the baby boomers, and a demographic anomaly. We are a little healthier than the Methodists, a little bit younger apparently. 2047 is when the Methodists will be cut in half. He was sure to say, Ryan was sure to say that, he's like, I can't predict what the Holy Spirit will do. That doesn't mean it'll precisely look like that. But based on the current trends, that's where we're headed. So maybe there's a unique constraint there. There's also maybe, I sort of said, and I think he gave a fascinating detail that if you were to sit in a church pew 50 years ago, you were most likely to sit beside a baby boomer. And if you were to sit beside somebody in the church pew this year, you were still likely to sit next to a baby boomer, most likely. Um, so that's just a fascinating sort of story. But if we only look at those details, we miss a lot of people who are faithfully showing up and doing faithful ministry. And um, so that's sort of, I like to hold those things in tension. I look at that research that Ryan Burge had shared, and at least the way I brought it to our folks, and sort of in light of John chapter 9's sermon that day,
Yeah.
the man who's um, been born blind, who Jesus encounters, sees on the side of the road, um, that if we sort of tarry too long over the sort of facts and the trends and those statistics, we'll miss a lot of people who are near to the edge, and have a lot of gifts to share,
Yeah.
and indeed Jesus is inviting us to encounter,
Yeah.
and celebrate. So I hold those things in tension. I mean, I think you and many of our mutual friends have like reinforced that, both that sort of sense of seeing abundance where you might justifiably see scarcity or become sort of nervous about where things are headed. There's also, I think, great freedom within constraints, and just so many beautiful and rich human stories and creativity.
Yeah.
Um, I know Mike likes to quote Willie Jennings. Mike Mather likes to quote Willie Jennings, who has a line, I think it's in his book After Whiteness. There's all sorts of unused gospel lying around.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't mind putting it to better use and to good use.
Yeah. Well, I read Ryan Burge and come away thinking it's clear he's a demographer and
Mm-hmm.
pretty good one, but demography's not theology. And there are three Johns that we talked about earlier that all
Yeah,
could be, you could find quotes where they would talk about the church of their age and how it
yes,
was failing and dying, and
that's correct.
but the Holy Spirit is maybe bigger and
Mm,
functioning in ways we don't see. And I know you've had the privilege of working in diverse settings among
that's
wealthier
true.
people, among less wealthy people. One of the things I think Burge misses is
Mm,
the vitality of congregations like the one where you serve,
mhm,
or the gift of diverse congregations, and there are many out there.
mhm.
So, talk a little bit about what you see as a young pastor in terms of your congregation and beyond.
I do see real ingenuity. I mean, I see faithfulness as well. I see, um I think because I have been in even just in my time in sort of official ministry, and this doesn't include growing up or, friends' churches and people I'm in otherwise relationship with. And I think if I moved to Indianapolis right after seminary to serve as a pastoral resident at Second Presbyterian Church, which is the largest PCUSA church in the whole state and one of the largest in the denomination, um, where even there, conversations about scarcity and declining membership were like felt, and were open among members and staff. Now that in no way, in most of those conversations, it was not like an abdication of, oh, we're on the decline and it's, it won't be
Yeah,
changed. It was late in, I don't know, it's 2021. So there's still sort of COVID is looming and people are in masks when I first got there. Um, and then I also served, um, Witherspoon Presbyterian Church as well, which is a historical Black congregation in Indianapolis. Yeah, Phil, I've served a lot of, I think, real variety of in places. So when I moved to Indiana was right after seminary, and I came to Second Presbyterian Church, which is the largest PCA church in the state of Indiana, one of the largest in the denomination. And I was a pastoral resident, so I was both an intentional sort of learner. Got to serve fairly immediately. But even there, in a place that, I mean, I think when I got there was 11 or 12 pastors or seminary trained folks on staff. Um, and even there, conversations around, is there decline? We have lost membership in the last few years. There's, movements, there's excitement. There was a pandemic that interrupted a lot of things.
Right.
Um, and then I was also serving sort of concurrently as part of this residency at Second. I was also serving at Witherspoon Presbyterian Church, which is, I think at this time now, the last remaining historically Black church in the synods of Indiana and Illinois,
Oh my.
apart from Chicago, apart from the
Yeah,
ones
of
in
course.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Um, and there again, conversations on some amount of decline, but also partly they were the last remaining because Emmanuel Presbyterian Church merged within them in that time, sort of a longer process that just concluded in my 2 years. They moved into a new building. There was like real vibrance. There is real vibrance there. Their church, again, stories of decline, experiences of that, and vibrance, new building, excitement, really vibrant pastor there, Reverend Dr. Winterborn Harrison Jones. And then I did sort of a transitional year for myself, and before I got to Bloomington, and I was in Greensburg, Indiana, 2 yoked congregations, Kingston and Spring Hill Presbyterian churches. And they've been yoked, sharing one pastor, being sort of 6 miles apart since I think the '60s. I mean, it's been a long-standing experience to sort of share in ministry, to share life together. I mean, relatives, one church to the next. Um, and
Yeah.
there's stories that you could say, oh, there's numbers of decline, but it was such a broad experience for me to go from really large urban, suburban church, historically Black, more urban congregation, to rural churches, now moving to Bloomington. I mean, some of that sort of shifts around the various, political spectrum as well. Um, at each place there is desire to both maintain, sustain, build, like honor the past, try to discern what the moment for the future is. These are big questions that I also like. I hope that we're trying to not just do these things alone in isolation, but to share some of these conversations with
Yeah.
peers. And I think there's
Yeah.
real opportunity when we can explore those various settings and
Yeah. You're really privileged to have had that kind of diverse experience. I also know that you bring, other perspectives to ministry. For instance, I know that you, value contemplation and also activism. Those are sometimes sound polar,
yeah.
opposites, but as you know, they're not.
Mhm.
And I also know that you are a runner. What talk about each of those
Mm,
and the way it contributes to healthy ministry.
sure. Uh, I kind of grew up as sort of a quiet-ish person. I would say yes, I was quiet. I still can be sort of quiet and introspective, and uh, I also like grew up worshiping a lot, and not all worship would necessarily immediately be contemplative, but there was sort of this sort of sense that worship feeds into, like, worship is a beautiful end into itself. You can just sit and worship. Nothing immediately can change and resolve within you, and it's just something beautiful to be part of, and part of the stories of scripture, and in some sense just like a both an intuition and a sense of that worship leads to action, um, that prayer needs to evoke like real sort of changed encounter in the settings you're in. um, and so I think when I went to seminary I was a little bit longing for spiritual mentors perhaps, um, and sort of through some friends of friends and getting connected to some people, even within some of my coursework I got connected to one of the he was both the interim director of the Black Church Studies program. He was one of my teammates on the intramural basketball team. And he was somebody I'd met through another one of our mutual friends, Fernando Rodriguez, who, um, and so Fernando introduced me to Kermit Moss,
Ah,
who
yeah.
happened to be my TA for my parish leadership class, my third of
Wow.
4 years of school, and he introduced me to Howard Thurman. Um,
Uh,
and so it was partly just, you know, being involved in some student activism. I mean, what just in terms of sort of unique timing, Princeton Seminary published their historical audit on their relationship to slavery um, in the second year of my time at Princeton Seminary. And then over the next, that full year was conversations officially on campus, a lot of sort of, in the lunchroom, how do we respond to this? Students sort of, behind closed doors trying to think, how do we, you know, should we write letters to the board of trustees? In some cases, we did that. How do we talk to the president? What do we need to know about, the seminary's, rule book and policies? That how does the board structure work? Who needs to go read Robert's Rule of Order? Just figure out, decorum and so on and so forth. What do we
yeah,
have to say about respectability politics? I mean, there's all sorts of activism that we're trying to do in small and sort of
yeah,
public ways.
yeah,
Um, and I just kind of, and Kermit, just having been a student of Thurman's work and also just seeing those, and have at that time, was in his 5th or 6th year as a PhD student, had been there for his MDiv, had been at the school for a long time to see a lot of variations of student activity, activism, and so on. And so he then referred me to Thurman, and Thurman, I just really found a resonant voice,
yeah,
almost like hard to say
yeah.
why, apart from just like there was a desire to sort of center down, which is a phrase he often uses. Um, there was a sense of God's like really abiding spirit, that that was active in creation, active in personal encounter, active in the human heart, and that you know often led to changed real experience and encounter with people in the world. And so that just kind of really, yeah, it just resonated with myself.
Yeah.
Um,
Thurman is
and
someone whose name comes up frequently. We had Bob Hill, who's the dean of chapel at Marsh Chapel recently,
yeah,
and Bob talked about Howard Thurman. I had the privilege of preaching from that pulpit where Howard
mm,
Thurman
mm,
uh, was preacher, and just to pull some things together for our listeners,
please,
there was a fellow at Boston University when Howard Thurman was the dean of that chapel and was teaching at the School of Theology. Well, there are many people that I know, but the one that is the most famous in that era, of course, is Martin Luther King Jr. And
mm.
Howard Thurman was critical in helping King understand the relationship between faith and action. So, yeah,
And may I, if I might thread another needle, in part, King gets to know Thurman not immediately. That's not the first time he's met Thurman.
right,
Is when Thurman is the dean of the chapel there at Boston. Um, Thurman, I think it was his wife Sue, who was maybe a roommate at Spelman College
right,
with Martin's mom,
yeah,
and so Thurman and his wife, they traveled to India to visit Gandhi, I think when they were at Howard University. He was previously dean at Howard's chapel. Is sort of sent on a pilgrimage of friendship to India to consider what nonviolent resistance looks like. And this is like
yeah,
in the 30s ish, I
yeah,
think, 30s for early 40s at the most. And he comes back, and I think the very first people he and his wife have dinner with are like, you know, King Senior and, Mrs. King. And I think Martin's like 7 years old at the time. I mean, he's just a little
yeah,
kid. And these conversations about nonviolent resistance and activism, Gandhi's influence, and other really big conversations, global conversations, are being had at his dinner table when he's just a kid, an
mhm.
elementary kid. So it's just kind of
We
like a reminder, nothing comes from nothing a little bit.
right, and we could thread
Yeah,
these needles on and on. I mean,
we
one
could do
of
it
the
all
other
day.
people, that was a friend of Gandhi, who influenced King, and King quoted in a couple of his books is a Methodist missionary named E. Stanley Jones.
Mm,
And
mm.
so there are all of these interweaving. We dare not go down too many of those roads, but
We shouldn't, yeah.
there's a sense in which nothing
Mm.
is new. Um,
One final one that we should probably say, just because 'cause we're both in Bloomington, Indiana, as we have this conversation, is that, one of Howard Thurman's pastors is a Bloomington native, passed away a couple of years ago, Reverend Doctor Marvin Chandler, who
right,
was, native of Bloomington, pastored at Second Baptist, Indiana Hoosier graduate, um, and then later in his career was called to be the senior pastor at the church that Thurman founded, the Church for the Fellowship
right,
of All Peoples in San Francisco. Um, and so after Chandler retired, he and his wife Portia moved back to Indiana. They moved to Indianapolis and they worshiped at Witherspoon, which is one of the churches I served at. And
right.
because Winterborn, the senior pastor there, and I had developed a dear friendship, we had much of which had centered around Thurman and our connection to him. When Dr. Chandler passed away in, I think, June of 23, there was a service in Bloomington right then. There was also a service at Witherspoon in Indy in December, in Indianapolis at Witherspoon. And so I got to participate in that memorial service,
Wow,
um, to like say the pastoral prayer, for their family,
wow.
in that service. So it was, I don't know, it's kind of hard to sort of make sense of all that. It's just such a kinship that's, what started as just sort of a loose awareness, an introduction from a professor in seminary in New Jersey, becomes this like really close degree of separation, and impact between their family um, and now I'm in Bloomington. It's just kind of a incredible confluence.
That's great. Well, let's close out this segment with a couple. I didn't ask you about running, so I'm going to try to weave that into this question.
Of course.
But first, related to it, what are you reading?
Mm.
And does your reading lead to what you think as you run, or do you just run and not and try to let the mind be clear?
I often am thinking about things I'm reading when I'm running. I'm often listening to stuff on runs.
Right.
Um, it's a great place to restore, and I find there's a lot of creative energy that my brain just works through as I'm partially connected to a cell phone, but also kind of detached and sort of get to think. And um, I mean, I think I've written a handful of sermons more or less on or at least got main ideas and key points on. You It's kind of unfortunate. Like, oh, I'm going to do my leisure outside of office hours, and all of a sudden the sermon is coming
Yeah,
together, or other things are coming together in that time. But it certainly makes running. It's a reminder of how sacred it's been, in my own sort of personal life and story, and so I can't quite shake all that. You asked what I'm reading. I'm always reading kind of too many things at once, which is sort of a blessing and curse. I actually have just been reading, partly because of our church group. We're reading a book on the Apostles' Creed by Ben
oh,
Myers, who is out of Australia, a
right.
few years old now. It's part of a little catechisal, a series on catechisms. Um, and there's ancient tradition of studying the creeds before being baptized on Easter. So my colleague Tommy Grimm, senior pastor here, he's been doing that on Tuesdays, and he was away for spring break, and so I got to lead um, class on Tuesday, and so we were most immediately that book. Um,
That's great.
yeah,
Yeah. Studying the creeds before Easter. Uh, Good
the
thing
life
to do.
everlasting, yeah, the resurrection of the body, all these things are, uh,
Right.
you know,
Well, thank you, Tyler, for this opportunity to visit a bit. We're going to do another recording, and it will be up in a couple of weeks as well from when we're recording. I should say, look for Tyler's episodes after Easter, probably a week or two after Easter. But it's been great visiting with you, and we'll talk again.
Thank you, Phil. Talk to you soon.